I had a shower insight today.
Okay. Moral of today's podcast is take showers.
Yeah. Yes, showers. Frequent showers.
Just be wary of the drought conditions in California.
This is true. Yes.
Moderate your water. Stay hygienic.
Yeah.
Good ideas.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I've gotten a lot of great ideas in the shower.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask. That's literally, it sounds like shower thoughts.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's where I meditate, and that's where I've not written, but lots of ideas for poems have come through. I think it's because all of my senses are engaged. There's the sound, there's like the temperature.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it's a full body experience as well.
Welcome to the Embracing Mystery podcast. Join us as we explore together ways that we can embrace creative and spiritual mystery in our lives and simultaneously find ourselves embraced in the mystery of compassionate, creative interconnection, held by what may be called the divine or source or consciousness or even mystery itself. In the process, we seek to become more fully ourselves, find our home and places of belonging, and grow as creative, spiritual, and relational beings.
In the last episode, we talked about the source of creativity from a relatively theoretical or abstract perspective, drawing on our one-word description of it. Today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the lived experiences that we have with our creative process and what that looks like and how we view it in connection to source. But first, Raymond will facilitate a little practice for us to kind of get us started for our conversation so we can better listen and share our experiences together.
Thanks, Naz. So, building off of the last episode, I wanted to start this practice by getting us attuned to two of the potential sources of creativity, namely chaos and the void. With the void, it's simply going to be 1 minute of sort of restful mindfulness to cultivate inner space and to settle into that space. And with regards to chaos, I wanted to do a pull from Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt's Oblique Strategies deck. I don't have the deck in front of me. I just have the online version. And in the minute that we'll take to mindfully prepare ourselves in our discussion, I wanted to have the pull from the Oblique Strategies deck inform or guide our intentions in the space that we're going to create today. And so the pull is the phrase, consider different fading systems. So consider different fading systems. And we'll just pause for about a minute to prepare for the talk. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll just return to the space and get started.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
So today we have a couple questions that kind of go hand in hand, a chicken and egg situation to talk about. The first is, how's the creative process shaped by your view of the source? So as you are creating, how is the kind of conceptual world of what you imagine is the source of creativity? How is that shaping your actual experience? And then vice versa, how is your experience as you are creating, whatever that feels like or happens for you, how is that helping lead to your view of the source of creativity? So obviously those are mutually reinforced. If you have a particular framework or way of seeing things, that's going to shape how you interpret any particular thing that you're experiencing. But at the same time, our experiences can change how we view things. And I think about the experience of creativity as a common ground that for the four of us, but just in general for people, as whatever our cultural or spiritual backgrounds are, it's something that is a shared ritual or shared practice that doesn't necessarily look the same, doesn't necessarily have all the same experiences in it. I'm sure as we get into it, the four of us don't approach things all the same way at all. But from that experiential level of like the raw data of what we experience, it's something we can talk about of, well, this is how I do it. This is what happens. This is how I experience that happening. And I have this way of understanding it, but we all have access to the same kind of experiential level of it. So to begin, I wanted to pause and just invite us to, for a moment, reflect on what actually does that feel like for you. And for those who are listening as well, to be able to do that. And then when we dive into it, I want to get fairly concrete and ask about what's that look like when it comes to like the inspiration of what you want to make, the ideas for that. What's that look like in terms of your own engaging in the craft and as you're in the process of making something? And then what happens when you get stuck? At least maybe that's a category I'm throwing in, but I get stuck. So how do you deal with that? And then how do you know you're done? Like when do you say this is good enough, at least? If you're a perfectionist like me, you've got to say this is good enough. But how do you know that? So those are the kinds of things I want to explore. But first, let's just pause for a moment and then we can dive into that. Yeah, so is there someone who would like to go first? We'll all be able to interject and ask questions and such, but anyone who wants to begin explaining how you experience the creative process?
Yeah, I can offer one thing just to start, because maybe the most maybe the most controversial hot take version of the way I would put it is that I think it's very sort of combinatorial and mechanical in some way. By seeing the source of creativity as the all or nature, I think one of the consequences of that for myself, or two of the consequences for that for myself, would be that, one, you're presented with a numerous amount of possible pathways or routes or frameworks for doing creativity, and that can present a problem of having too many options. And so choosing a path is very useful. And that's what I mean by mechanical, is a sense of like, you having a method, having a sort of a practical, almost conveyor belt style methodology for doing anything creative.
Okay.
And the second consequence of viewing creativity as the all or as nature is that everything becomes sort of quote unquote grist for the mill. Everything is involved, and
you can work with anything.
You can work with anything. Okay. It all goes into the blender, and it all goes in sort of all mixes together in such a way that just the sheer interaction of different kinds of things create something new. So you don't really need to do too much outside of just putting Legos together to make something at its most basic level.
Yeah.
That's like, I guess that's what kind of...
What's that conveyor belt look like for you? You said like this particular mechanical way you go about it to combine all these things.
Yeah. Well, as an example, I recently participated in... I got halfway through what was called a song a day for a month sort of challenge thing. Right. And for me, the basic way I would kind of go about it is that, once I had a handful of ideas, and had a basic form for it, I would just say, okay, well, like section by section, let's say intro, verse, chorus, whatever. I would just tackle each part of the arrangement one at a time. Another example would be I'm wrapping up a full length album of songs, and the recording process of that was essentially tracking the most basic instrumentation first, and then doing all of the drums, and then doing all of the guitars. Like just very sort of sequential and workmanlike. And
was that the order you even wrote those parts?
I'm sorry?
Was that like the order you even wrote those parts in?
No, that was different because the demo process was closer to the way I did the song a day for a month thing. Okay. But the modularity, in almost sort of assembly line fashion of the process was consistent throughout, and it allows me two things. It allows me to get through ideas quickly, and to not to prevent my more sort of perfectionistic tendencies of like, well, if I don't have a
judging
it
or
being too precious,
yeah.
It's almost like if you view something as there's a benefit to viewing a creative a creative work as a product in some sense, because it's like you think about things from the standpoint of a minimal value. Like what's the most essential form of this thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of kind of putting it on like a pedestal where is that what you mean by the preciousness? Like, oh, this is so important or so big or such a important thing that it can like kill all the, I'm just going to make this, right?
That's right.
Is that what you mean by the product
You can destroy
piece?
it, like Nas said last time.
Right.
You can destroy ideas you don't like. That you're not holding it that way.
Yeah.
I'm not wanting to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand.
I think that's right. Like, I think if you were to try to make everything a magnum opus, at least in my case, I just never get anything done.
Yeah.
So,
I have one last question
helpful.
before I ask how we're relating to what he's saying. But I'm curious, when you're combining ideas, like what's that process of how something catches your attention, or how you say like, oh, I know I'm going to put this with this. And I know, like, what's that feel like? Or is there a particular way you do it? And then I'm curious about what's happening internally as much as you can reflect on that.
Yeah. It's not, Well, I think one thing I can say about it, just kind of going back to the whole idea of combination and sort of like Lego play aspect of things, is that you develop a sense of style and a sense of what you like and don't like sort of implicitly over time. And that's with anything, really. Yeah. And so I have a general sense of the kind of poetry I like. I have a general sense of the kind of music and the sounds that I like. And even from my philosophy writing standpoint, I have a sense of the kind of language that I like. It can't be sort of too dry or too full of jargon, that sort of thing. And so you have this you do have this sort of container or general sense of things, and the rest of it is that comes down to like a balance of again sort of sticking to the method. And then just free play is the best way I can put it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
So as we're listening, how are you each responding? Are there parts that resonated like, hey, that's how I do it too? Or things where you,
it's good.
Maybe different, but yeah.
For me, definitely different. I think I don't relate to the first part at all, at least not right now in this
The conveyor belt.
part of my life. I was like, I don't relate to that. But the second part I did, where it's like kind of like creativity is kind of embedded in life like that. But first part, definitely not. And when you sent out the question about creative process, I'm not going to lie, the first thought that came into my head was, what process?
Yeah.
Yeah, what process? Because I feel like right now I don't have like a routine or process. I wish I could say that I get up every morning and I write some stuff. I don't. I'm very jealous of people who could do that. I'm like, oh, I don't. But I think I notice some patterns that I fall back on with my creativity. And one of that is maybe inspiration, maybe relying too much on inspiration.
Okay. Like waiting for it to just happen.
Yeah, waiting for it to just happen. And then the other part is, well, like with the art share, the prompts, when I'm forced to kind of think of something and then challenge myself. But with the first part, with inspiration, that will happen like on long walks, going on hikes, like having time to kind of think, or just let all of the thoughts just pass through my head and then filter through. And then I've gotten a lot of great ideas in the shower.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask. That's literally, it sounds like shower thoughts.
That's right. Yeah.
I think that's where I meditate, and that's where I've not written, but lots of ideas for poems have come through. I think it's because all of my senses are engaged. There's the sound, there's like the temperature.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it's a full body experience as well.
With
thinking.
really helpful.
Yeah. And then with the other part, the prompts, like with the art share, I think the very first art share that I went to was the talking to ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to do this, like talking to ourselves. But I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm like, the first thing I said was like, oh, I'm going to write a poem. And so I was trying to look for inspiration. Sometimes I like to read other poets' works and things like that. And I was looking for this one poem by this Bengali poet from like the 1960s. I don't know why I was looking for it at the time. It was a poem called like Stark Electric Jesus. I forget who
My curiosity.
I forget who the author is, but it's the Bengali poet, and I was trying to get the background for that because I like to do research, and like the research will like inspire other things. Then I came across that this poem was turned into a film. That's where I came across like Cinepoem, and I was like, oh, that's new. I want to try that. I've never made a film before or combined my poetry with film.
That's where that came from.
So yeah, that's where it came from. So I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do or how to do this, like, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to challenge myself. Yeah.
That's awesome. And it sounds like it even came out of your research process as well.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's either I will be inspired or I will torture myself.
Okay. Nice.
Yep.
Well, one thing I wanted to kind of note there was that in all those cases, it sounds like what you're calling attention to in my mind is like the importance of setting. That like even for my end, like the whole sort of like combinatorial like sort of like laboratory version of it still requires space and time. I mean, with that song a day for a month thing or whatever, like eventually these things were taking like 5 or 6 hours, or when I would write like essays for class, I would just do it in one sitting, but it would take like hours and hours and hours. And so the importance of space and also sort of like a way of kind of accessing or settling into your body, I think are still essential.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that settling into your body piece? Because I think maybe you kind of touched on it with like even like the full sensory experience of taking a shower. I just would use that to procrastinate, get the like pressure off myself. Like, okay, well, I'm taking a shower. I can't write my paper right now. So I guess now all the good ideas come. But I'm curious how, the body part.
I don't necessarily, I don't have like a practice. I actually probably should have one. But it's more just about knowing the times that work, or not necessarily the times that work, but sort of knowing what I need to do to kind of prepare my environment such that I can work. Because, I think as a consequence of working a day job, perhaps my creative output isn't so precious, but the time and the energy that I have is. And I want to kind of condition myself such that I can find a way to do work regardless of kind of what's happened throughout the day, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. As a way of like getting down to the work regardless, not being just like swayed by your current state of being. Yeah,
because again, it's like I know that pragmatically speaking, if that was the case, I would not get anything done.
Right.
Yeah.
I just note. Is it okay? I just noticed in terms of I'm connecting back to the words we used to describe source.
Yeah.
And Raymond's, it's everything, and it's the natural process. You even referred to like nature itself is constantly just making stuff, which lends itself to that view of process, right? I've just got to be I just have to do it. I mean, that's what everything does is it makes stuff, right? Yeah. So, but chaos, on the other hand, which was one of your words, what's a process, and so I just thought it was very fascinating. And yet you both also ended up saying some pretty similar things. So I just found that really fascinating to observe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Does that resonate with you for chaos, that piece?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Like the nonlinearity of
put it on you,
yeah.
But yeah.
That's how I'm presenting myself. So
true. Yes. Right.
How about yourself?
Yeah. So I had a shower insight today.
Okay. Moral of today's podcast is take showers. Yeah.
Yes. Showers. Frequent showers.
Just be wary of the drought conditions in California.
This is true. Yes.
Moderate your water. Stay hygienic.
Yeah.
Get good ideas.
Very good idea. Yeah, that's right. So without going into a ton of detail about that, my word was love. And I said a little bit about that, but I was processing it because lately I've also there's another podcast that we're part of producing, which is coming to an end as this one's beginning. And in that one, I've been exploring empathy. And I realized today that actually empathy is probably more what I meant when I talked about love. And it's that putting myself in the position of someone else and experiencing life as they are. So a lot of the sad songs I write about other people are actually because I'm empathetic with people I've seen or whatever, and I'm trying to feel what they're feeling, etc. Because most of the sad songs are describing characters that are nothing like me. Torn up, broken relationships. I've been with the same partner since I was 17 and she was 16. And I'm a little bit older than my 20s. And so for those of you who are not watching, I'm 67. It's pretty clear to those who are seeing this. But anyway, so I think empathy and how that generates things for me is more what I was starting to get at. And I view source that way, actually. I'm coming to understand that that empathy is actually a key piece of ultimate reality, even in the language of physics, and entanglement of particles and all. That's kind of trading places and being connected and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of where I'm continuing to reflect, and how that affects my process is empathizing, but then also, and sometimes it just happens, inspiration, chaos, no process. And sometimes it's actually intended and kind of on the thing. So for June, it's June as we're doing this, it's June 1st. A lot of stuff happens in the calendar in June. And one of the days I came across was the commemoration of the Equal Pay Act for women back in 1963. Passed a law. We haven't done it. And I thought, I want to write a song about equal pay. And I just started to try to put myself in the position of a woman who's not receiving equal pay. And it turned out to be almost a humorous song, but it was an empathy based
thing. Do you
thing.
write from that perspective every time of the person you're empathizing with, or does that just help get you some perspective on the situation?
A lot of my songs are from the perspective of a person in the situation I'm writing about, or the person or whatever, as opposed to me writing about them. Although I do have songs where I'm writing about a person, but empathy is involved, I think, each time. And I hadn't really noticed that until in the shower this morring.
Okay. So just intuitively, that's been part of your process, or a key piece of it.
It seems like it. Yeah. Yeah.
What happens? Like, do you even get stuck writing? You're pretty prolific in like putting new songs out.
I do get stuck.
Okay.
Yes, I do. I have a few things where it just isn't, it's like, it's just not there yet. And I just have to set it aside and wait. And maybe it just isn't time yet.
So you have like a parking lot of things.
Yeah. But not like officially, like they're somewhere, but
floating about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a few things I just haven't been able to finish. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
So, but yeah, good question.
Yeah. For me, I'm trying to think I'll obviously share my process is, but I'm trying to think how it intersects with you all. So maybe I'll start with kind of how I approach it. Mm-hmm. It's a little different. I have two ways that I do things. Sometimes, like if we have a prompt or a practice or something that stirs up a lot in me, like something emotionally or conceptually or a combination of the two, I will sometimes just have a moment of like some metaphor or analogy, especially if it's a visual piece, like it'll just like kind of plop into my head. And sometimes even with like the composition where I'll be like, okay, this is going to go over here, this is going to happen here, and I'll just sketch it out and know I'm going to come back to it later for how I'm going to make it. Other times it's, and this is especially, I don't know the craft of poetry at all. I just, to the extent I've done it, I'm just winging it. But when I do it, it's much more stream of conscience with the sense or the caveat that I'm really slowed down usually when I'm doing it, where I probably already was in a really still place, had spent some time in silence, and to some extent that embodiment piece of like, okay, my body, I don't have a whole bunch of anxiety or things going on, I'm calm. Then when I write from that place, it's just kind of just like line by line and just different images, metaphors, etc., kind of flow in there. And if I can't capture it, I'll get at least the idea of what I'm trying to do and come back to it if it doesn't flow in that moment. Whereas I think visual art I have some pieces that I've done where it's like I'm just in intuitive mode in the middle of it, where I had a basic concept for something that was going to happen, and the rest I'm just winging it. And like, I feel like I should put a brushstroke here. Great, and I'll do that and put things into that. Then later, surprise me when I kind of sit with what might this mean? Why is this jellyfish here? Oh, well, it's because I have some sting still left from something in my past, as an example of a piece where I just put something in there. I was like, I took some photos at the aquarium, and then for some reason I want to put that in here. It's not about that at all. So it's kind of interesting how that happens. But when I reflected on how that connects to my view of source, I said mystery, and particularly reflecting on the connection between how I understand divine mystery and the nuanced mess of what does it mean to be human, and where do we end, and consciousness, or a divine mystery / consciousness for me. Whole other topic of ontologically how I understand any of that. But intentionally knowing it's a blurry space where I'm not trying to distinguish, but it feels a lot like what I do as a spiritual director, where sometimes similar kind of images or metaphors will come up, and I'll just offer that to a directee to sit with. And it's not always helpful, but when it is, sometimes it's even been something they've been thinking about, their own imagery that they use, and I didn't know that. And so I don't know if that's happening in my art too. That'd be great, but I don't try to distinguish it. I'm just like, well, I'm trusting my intuition here, and that kind of nebulous space of being human connected with something more. So, yeah.
Well, and since you're our facilitator today, it's hard to ask yourself a question. Well, that would be a good question. If you could ask yourself any question right now.
I would draw a blank, so it's better if you ask me.
But like, how are you you've been listening to us, how would you connect what you just shared?
There's definitely
with
the piece of what are the contexts of getting in the right space for listening, because that's not like my normal experience. Like I don't feel like there's moments where I create and I'll sit down and make a piece in 4 hours, or I'll be like, I'm going to write a poem and I'm going to write it right now. First draft, the final draft. Great. But I don't feel like I have it's not like a daily thing. It's not like I need to be in that right space to do it. So I'm not good at doing what you do, Raymond, of like setting up the space and be like, I'm going to show up and I'm going to make something.
Well, I guess just to kind of gently sort of like, I don't know, push back. But
push back's fine.
Whatever you need to do. Yeah. Push away.
Addend your statement. I only advocate or sort of think about my process in those terms because I know that like left to my own sort of like natural inclinations, like there's definitely a part of me that's just gonna like want to be on Reddit for like an inordinate amount of time. And so it's
that's
like
my life. I'm just doing something else.
And so I guess like there's a way in which like having a process can kind of democratize creativity as an act.
That's fascinating.
Because it's like there's at least to me, sort of putting the, I guess for lack of a better term, like the locus of control, or like the where you sort of find source. If it's somewhere else in this almost sort of like sacred or cultic fashion, there immediately becomes a limit of access. It's like
who can get to it.
Who can get to it? But if it, to me, it's like if it's everywhere all the time, and it's just a matter of sort of like putting like setting up the lightning rod and just kind of like sort of sitting out there, then all of a sudden you're immersing yourself in a nonlinear chaotic field, but you have like a lightning rod, and anyone can hold up a metal stick for a certain amount of time. Does that make sense?
I really appreciate that, because I wouldn't want it to be seen as like some special thing set apart. I think my set apartness in the moments that I do it is more like that's what it takes for me to get my lightning rod out.
Sure, yeah.
Like I think everyone would have access to all of that. It's just for me to get out of my like analytical brain and let things flow. I have to do that first,
and it gets easier with time, I think. Yeah,
that makes sense.
How are you responding to those?
Yeah, something was coming to me. I was kind of listening to both of you, and I'm hearing that perspective as like creativity as an intentional like process with like an end goal or outcome in mind.
Productivity.
Yeah, no. But there's also the other aspect of, but we're always in the creative state, right? How do you know you're being creative when you're always in it, right? Especially with dressing, right? Especially for me, it's jewelry and makeup and cooking and the way I speak and maybe things like that. So you're doing it without even knowing. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need to be in that space all the time?
That's fair.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean,
because it's if it is everything,
Right.
then you're always in it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Is that part of what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I wanted to kind of combine that question with a question that I had for you, Kevin, which is like, when, you're talking about sort of like empathy and almost sort of like inviting or exploring other perspectives, like, or maybe this is for all of you guys, like, if creativity is kind of happening all the time and most of it is improvisatory and unintentional, kind of going back to even what Stephen was asking earlier, like, what is there an implicit goal? Does there always need to be one? And then when do you know you've arrived? Yeah.
When's it good enough if it's an official piece too?
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how to answer that part necessarily, but I think as I've been listening, it helped me even articulating empathy. If my understanding of empathy is it's not just like trying to feel as if, but actually feel as Raymond, as Stephen, as the chair, and if my
What about Naz? Are you gonna
and Naz
are you gonna empathize
and
with her
Haley,
too, please?
who's sitting here, and you in the audience is yes, thank you, and the bubbly water.
We're inclusive.
But if that's my sense is that that's part of ultimate reality, which would mean the divine mystery, etc. is also that's the nature of things. It means that my creative process isn't precious in that sense. It isn't trying to get to the sacred thing. It just is. And because empathy is a way of talking about connection and union and an interness to that. And I think that's chaotic and it can feel empty because if it's the same, then it isn't other, which means anyway, and it's the process, it's the everything, and it's mysterious, and it's all of.
How do you know when you're done empathizing?
Yeah, that's the other.
Like,
I knew you were going to ask that.
Today,
I knew you were going to ask that.
This is done. I've empathized. We're good here.
Yeah.
Not that there's an end to it, but like, how do you decide? Like, okay, I think I've captured what I wanted to capture here. That's really what I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it's ever. I mean, I think some of it is, my personality type in Myers-Briggs is I'm a very strong P. And so part of it is like I could just let things go forever because I don't really need closure. And yet I think the flip side of that is I'm okay with it being unfinished and just getting out there. Because
you're not a perfectionist.
I could always redo it later.
Yeah.
It's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
That's my.
Any other reflections on that question?
Like getting stuck.
Like how unstuck, or like how do you know when you're like kind of have your piece has arrived, you're good enough with it, or you've
well,
gotten
if there's a deadline, I know.
Yeah, the deadline. There's an art share coming, and I have to present it. Yeah.
Great. So do you use deadlines to get your work done?
Well, yeah, sometimes,
Okay.
Especially if it's like something I have to present.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
That helps.
And then,
actually.
but I also think I've accepted that sometimes it's not going to be finished. I have so many unfinished poems in my phone, so many ideas, a memoir that I've been trying to work on for the last 7 years that I tried to work and rework. And then last year, I just erased it all completely because I was like, I destroyed it. I just,
Like literally erased it.
Keep,
Yeah.
like,
You didn't just erase
draft
the
of it somewhere.
Wow. Okay.
I made a
your own-
copy, but then I put it away. But like, I just started from scratch
Like,
because
holding up as a
Scared
journal
me.
of your life.
I started from scratch because I'm a different person after 7
Right.
years.
Yeah,
My
sure,
lens of
sure,
my
sure.
life is different, but also not just perfectionism, but with writing memoir, for me, I get stuck because I have to think the ethics of information that I'm going to present about my own life, but not just my life, but the lives that were entangled with my life.
Yeah.
And so much research that
Yeah.
you do means that ethical question comes up about the people you've researched, right?
Yeah.
So that's very unique, I think. So, yeah. But important. I really respect that a lot. Yeah.
Do you have a way, Raymond, that you know?
I think, deadlines are definitely helpful. I think form is also a big part of it. Like, a song kind of looks like a song, a poem kind of starts to look like a poem, and so on and so forth. It's like,
You fit it. Yeah.
yeah. And again, it kind of goes back to this idea of modularity. And sometimes I even just sort of will start with a form just so it has a container. And then I can kind of just do it piecewise and say, okay, how does this fit together? All right, good, I'm done. And that does sort of also maybe in a way tie back into the question that you were posing, Naz, about like, if creativity is everything, like when does the question of method come in? I think for me, it's like it's just a matter of particularity. That like, yes, absolutely, 100% creativity is happening all the time, everywhere. But if I'm going to kind of like, and that's why I think the lightning rod is a good metaphor for it, because it's about sort of a focusing process. That if I'm going to create a song, or if I'm going to create an essay or something very topical about this particular thing, I am sort of like switching from, I think like Alison Gopnik talks about this, switching from like lantern consciousness to spotlight consciousness. So it's like you're going from something that's very diffuse and open and almost like a daydream, which is like maybe like waking life, and then you're kind of sort of it's like siphoning it and focusing it into like the intentional method and practice of creating this thing, and then you're done. And then it can go back to lantern, and that in and of itself is a bit of a nonlinear process, but yeah. So I think form and sort of like recognizing the particularity of a thing that you're doing is a good way to craft, which is kind of like a tautology, but I guess to answer your question,
No, that makes sense. Letting the craft of your form define it.
Yeah,
I think for me, where from that question partially comes from, where I have to wrestle with it, is like if I'm doing computer art stuff where I can always change a layer, I can always tinker, I can always add a brushstroke, but I don't like that brushstroke, delete it. It lends itself to where it's done when it either looks good enough, or for me, it's particularly if there's an emotion I'm trying to capture, there's this kind of intuitive rechecking, like, is this what I was sensing? Is this capturing, seeming to get the concepts or the emotion that I had in the initial kind of inspiration phase of it? And that's usually when I decide it's good enough, or if I have something to do.
That makes sense.
So thank you all.
Thank you.
So the Embracing Mystery podcast is community driven, but the podcast is only the start of the conversation. We want to share some questions for your reflection. We would love to hear about how you experience the creative process. Are there things in particular that one of us said that you relate to or resonates with you? And are there any new ways you want to experiment with your creative process?